The Last of Us Part 2 doesn't matter, so let's not let it matter. This game does not make a difference for this generation, so let's just forget about it and move on. I think that's the biggest fuck you we can give to Neil Druckmann. I just think ignoring this would be better than to do what we're all doing, including myself. I played the first game approximately 7 years ago, and I remembered it being one of the first games that pushed me into a narrative that wasn't with music or movies. It was a new mode of entertainment. I've never really cared, and I still don't care about video game stories, if I'm being honest. I do think there have been a lot of great characters and stories that have come across console and PC, but in my opinion, if the gameplay isn't good, then what's the point of playing the game at all? I want to get the rating of the game out of the way quickly, so here it is. This game's a 6 out of 10. It deserves a 6 out of 10 without a doubt in my mind. I know a lot of people hate this game solely because of the political message, and I will address that later, and you can skip ahead if that's all you are interested in. Regardless of the politics, the game is still below average at best. I would even consider giving it a 5, but I think a 6 is very fair. Prior to this debauchery, The Last of Us 1 brought to light a story of two individuals who had lost everything and came together to find meaning where there was none. There was a level of hope that maintained through their journey, a level of hope which kept the narrative and characters alive. Their mission had purpose that ultimately drove their story, and their story was so powerful that you could overlook the set dressing. And I don't know how another zombie game in a post-apocalyptic world driven by savagery won our hearts, but it really did. The Last of Us Part 2 is derived from the same set pieces, but the story is so empty and boring, contrived, lackluster. There's not enough words to describe this level of boring and bland. Oh, and I forgot, since the leaks are about, since they're out and the game's done and blah, 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 we're talking about that shit. All right, you can tune out, but you might as well just stop now. Story begins 4 years after the original game, showing how far their civilization has come. And Ellie, Joel, Dina, Tommy, and the Asian dude, I think his name's Jesse, they're all living in Jackson, Wyoming, and it's become more or less their city or a township. The infected still loom around the outer walls of the city, and they need to be taken care of. These characters, which are the main characters, have to patrol the wilderness to find the infected and kill them off so that their home stays safe. Later, we find out that Joel and Tommy, Joel's brother, they never show up to a rendezvous point, and Ellie becomes worried. She ends up stumbling upon a house where a group of wolves, such a dumb name, they're part of another encampment in Seattle, and they were formerly Fireflies, which were from the previous game. She sees them murder Joel in cold blood. After Joel's demise, they let Ellie and Tommy free, and Ellie chooses to find Joel's killer, which is Abby, and to make sure that she pays for what she has done. This is the setup for the entirety of Ellie's story, and yes, it's a revenge story. Is that bad for a plot? I guess not really, but like the first game, the idea for the narrative was also unoriginal, but what brought it to life was the characters, and these characters in The Last of Us 2 are just not at all interesting. And the way Naughty Dog tries to make them interesting was by having terrible things happen to them, but not having the characters, quote unquote, happen to their environment. What I mean by that is not one character shares another character's interest. There is no coming together for selfless reasons. I guess maybe you could argue that the revenge of Joel's death is selfless, but would he really want that? And nothing the characters choose to do makes any difference because there is always the worst and most difficult obstacle to overcome or stands in their way. No character has personal growth, nor do the characters grow together. Everyone's against one another, even in their own little tribes. They tried to give Abby some sort of personal growth, but it comes off as totally hypocritical, and we'll talk about that later. Anyhow, here are some examples. So number 1, Ellie. She wants to seek revenge because Abby killed Joel, and now she wants to kill Abby. She loses everything and everyone in her life for this one person. Number 2, Tommy. He secretly wants to get revenge but doesn't want Ellie to go with him, so he lies to her so that he can eventually go on his own to kill Abby and her friends, but then at the end of the game he wants Ellie to go out and try to kill Abby again, but Ellie says no, but then she ends up going out anyway. Why are we pitting them against each other? Why not create a bond? Dina, she wants to go and support Ellie in finding Abby, but she really just wants to date Ellie. Then we find out she's pregnant, and instead of going back and taking care of the baby, she stays with her potential girlfriend in Seattle to try to kill another person. And they do weird shit with pregnant women this whole game. Like, they aren't like delicate or anything. They put them in war constantly. It's weird. The Asian guy, Jesse, I can't remember. I don't even give a shit what his name is. I honestly don't know why he's in the game at all. He could have not been in the game and no difference would have been made. Joel immediately dies. Number 6 is Abby. Joel kills her father, so she wants revenge and she gets her friends to join her on a manhunt to find Joel and succeeds. The way her friends and herself go about everything, they all want different things. Some of them want to kill Joel instantly, others want to torture him, some of them want to kill Ellie and Tommy, and then later in the game, the dynamic between Abby, Owen, and Mel has them all splitting off into different directions because none of them can agree on anything they want in life. There are more characters we could focus on, but it doesn't matter at this point because you get the idea. The whole game is about creating barriers for these characters to overcome, which is normal in a story, but every character, no matter how big or small, have individual barriers that separate them from one another, so there's no reunity in regard to anything. The plot feels like it was written by a teenage girl who just started a writing course in college. Let's talk about Abby a little bit since she is a very important character in all this bullshit. About 1/3 into the game, you switch characters and you stop playing as Ellie. You start playing as Abby after you just murdered one of the most beloved characters in the franchise, but that didn't bother me too much, I guess. It was just the methodology behind it all. And as I mentioned before, at the end of the first game, when Ellie arrives at the hospital, Joel changes his mind about turning Ellie over to the Fireflies because in order to cure everyone in the infected or stop it or whatever the fuck, they would have to kill Ellie, and I don't even understand how a cure would fix anything anyway. Joel ends up going to the OR and murders everyone and takes Ellie away. The lead surgeon in that operating room was Abby's father, and now Abby is an orphan and seeks revenge on Joel and obviously ends up killing him. This sparks off Ellie's revenge, so on and so on. The way this game is divided narratively is as follows. The intro of the game is split time between Abby and Ellie in present day. Segment 1 is Ellie's 3-day journey for revenge in present day, along with flashbacks of her and Joel. Abby and Ellie finally meet from Ellie's perspective, and then you switch to Abby. Segment 2 is Abby's 3-day journey in present day, along with some of her flashbacks with her father, and then you meet Ellie from Abby's perspective. Segment 3, or the outro, is split time between Abby and Ellie after a climactic scene at the movie theater where they essentially call a truce, and then you go up through the ending, which is just so stupid. This is important to segment everything, although very boring, sorry about that, needs to be laid out for explanation. We see Ellie's point of contention and understand why she wants to kill Abby, and we watch her journey to the climax of the story. But with Abby, her journey has already happened. She already killed Joel. Why was it so important to play as her in present time? Well, Naughty Dog just wanted the player to sympathize or empathize with Abby. However, the way they did it was just weird as fuck and ultimately unnecessary. We clearly understand Abby's motivation for killing Joel, but why does Naughty Dog insert a third plot line into the game? The main plot is Ellie getting revenge towards Abby. The subplot is Abby's journey and reason for killing Joel. What else do you need? Well, apparently you need to have a third subplot where you search for Abby's friend Owen, and while she is along the way, she makes 2 new besties. Mind you, these people she meets and ultimately sacrifices everything in the game for are part of a rival tribe called Seraphites, aka Scars. So dumb. Both Abby and these Scars are now in trouble and they team up to become best friends, and that's your journey for like 15 fucking hours. And I know I said this before, that there is no common connection between any characters, and that remains true here too. The Scars just want to escape because they betrayed their society because one of them is trans, and Abby feels guilty about not helping them because one of them broke their arm, so she goes completely out of her way to help heal a lady with a broken arm. That's 15 hours of the game, pretty much. This whole segment is totally unnecessary and doesn't add to the story at all, but at least we learn how to use the correct pronouns. After Abby and Ellie's paths finally meet during Abby's gameplay segment, you continue to play as Abby and beat the shit out of Ellie, where you leave and call another truce. Afterwards, the player goes back to playing as Ellie for a bit to find out she lives on a farm with her girlfriend and they have a child. She then goes back to kill Abby again, as if we could not have done this the first time around. During this time period, Ellie heads to Santa Barbara where Abby has relocated. Abby ends up getting kidnapped by a crazy commune and is imprisoned. Ellie finds the commune, tries to kill Abby again, but doesn't, and decides to let her go. What the hell? This is the like 3rd time people have just let each other go, and the main main story, but there's a ton more of that Angry Joe shows in his video that I didn't even notice. Ellie comes back from not killing Abby this third or fifth time at this point, and finds that her girlfriend and child have moved out of her house and she's all alone to play guitar finally. Oh, dude, I'm so pumped for Ellie. There's no nagging bitch wife anymore, so she can fucking start that garage band she's always wanted to start for The Last of Us Part 3. It's gonna be so sick. So fucking sick, dude. The story ends up being a shitty mirror of itself, trying to show you that all these characters are flawed, broken, and cut from the same cloth. But it does it in such a diluted methodology. Every scene or narrative drive these characters have is filled with menial dramatics. Here are just a few questions I have for the Naughty Dog narrative team. This sort of connects back to the initial list of just like weird plot points about how everybody's just their own individual with no connection to another human being. So the first question I have for Naughty Dog is, why did Dina even come along if she ends up sitting in the movie theater the whole time doing absolutely nothing because she's pregnant? Ellie couldn't have figured out the radio codes herself, like she couldn't have. What was the point of the Asian dude? Jesse or James? I don't know his name. What was the point of him? Why did Tommy lie to Ellie about going to get revenge in the first place and then totally change his mind the second time? Why didn't they just go together and get revenge? Why couldn't they have bonded over Joel's death and found connection through grief or something deeper? Why was it so important for Abby to find Owen when the story is about Ellie's revenge? What was the point of the battle between the wolves and the Seraphites at the end of the game? Like, it doesn't even matter. What was the point of having to save that lady with the one arm, which is a 10-hour quest, only to amputate it and then have her fucking die? Why even have the subplot of Abby and Lev at all? It seems to me there was a lot of fat that could have been cut off this game to make the focus more on Ellie and less on Abby. And even if we still had to play as Abby, why not show her journey up to killing Joel, you know? And explain why she became so jaded. It was so unnecessary to play as Abby and have fans try and empathize with her. And if she was really the enemy, then why not delve into that deeper? We start off having Abby be this crazy, angry, fucking muscular lady who murders the shit out of Joel, but then her gameplay segment is her being this sweet, caring person, which is totally out of the character profile you established at the beginning of the fucking game. The message was confusing. Not to mention, the whole time I was playing as Ellie, she was, oh my god, I was so annoyed. She was like, you ruined her character. Ellie's character was so mean and drab, and I just don't remember that being a part of the first game. I literally didn't like her at all. Meanwhile, Abby is this roided out lady with the drive to kill Joel, but then is also this sweetheart who helps the enemy that is wiping out her own people. These characters are all over the place without any unity, and there's no reason to care about them in any way, shape, or form. And on top of all this, each portion of the game is so long. I think it took me like 30 hours to complete, and by the end I was so bored I just wanted to fucking give up. But, you know, I really wanted to give this game a fair shake. I knew that there was going to be social justice bullshit in it, but I wanted to try to see around that. I really wanted to try. I really did. And I think I did, actually, because besides all of that social justice crap, it still sucks.
Gameplay.
I don't have a ton to say about the gameplay because it really wasn't special, but I'll combine, you know, what elements of the gameplay and the story that I found to be important, because there were some parts that were definitely really good. I mean, don't get me wrong, but the innovation was pretty poor. That being said, this game's core gameplay loop reminds me a lot of Resident Evil 2 and Resident Evil 3, the remakes. The idea where you have like a sticky gun where your aiming is just not perfect and there's a little sway, and it, you know, the third person element, limited resources with your weapons. You can't upgrade a ton. The upgrades in this game were obviously a lot better, but you know what I mean. What obviously makes this not like Resident Evil is the stealth elements, which were also totally boring and lackluster. There were a couple times though where you're alone and you're in the pitch black and there's nothing but your flashlight and it's like the battery's dying, and I won't lie, dude, my heart started pumping. And sometimes you'd just be in this like hospital and there would be a flashing light or something, and then it would be completely lit up and then dark and you're alone. Oh, it was great. And I really love when a game could bring to life an element of unknown mixed with that suspense. And since this isn't a horror game, it wasn't common, and it made those moments even more special. And it actually allowed me to throw all the negative crap out the window and just be in the game. But that was so few and far between. So the gameplay loop is as follows, I suppose. You hide in the bushes, stab everybody in the neck until you get caught, then you feverishly switch through your weapons while you shoot enemies off one by one, then you go to the next area, and that's pretty much it. Nothing to see here. Nothing was new here. I think the 3 best sections of the game were the boss rushes, actually. They were pretty tough and they made you work to kill them. I also enjoyed the 2 scenes where you were playing as Abby, the scene where you were saving Joel before you needlessly murdered him, and where you are running through the Seraphites' burning village trying to escape. Both scenes that were totally unnecessary, but the gameplay was pretty fun. The Santa Barbara portion of the gameplay was decent, but only because you got a silenced machine gun, and other than that, it was the same as the rest of the game. And to be honest, Abby's gameplay section was far better than Ellie's. Like I said a moment ago, this game was pretty long, and they had to pad out the upgrade systems to make them seem like you were earning at a casual rate, but since the game was so long, it meant upgrading things took forever, and if you were not playing on easy, then you wouldn't really get to upgrade anything because resources are so limited. During Abby's portion, upgrades were a lot quicker to come by, and the pacing of the gameplay to story ratio was a lot better. But the thing is, this part of the game and story doesn't fucking mean anything. We all wanted to play as Joel and Ellie, and the times we get to are drawn out, boring segments of the story that don't mean anything, or we're playing as Abby and get to do all the fun shit with a character no one likes who isn't even fleshed out properly, is clearly a hypocrite when it comes to her enemies and her own morality, and turns out to be a traitor to her own people.
Environment.
If anyone says this game is in bad shape because of graphics, they are straight up lying. Naughty Dog did an amazing job here when it came to designing this game, and everything in this game mattered graphically and environmentally, and the levels were pretty decent. They were linear, but the game is linear, so you can't really expect anything less. Every environment was pristine. The snowy mountains of Wyoming, the lush green of Seattle, the destructed city of Seattle, the island village coming down in flames, the beaches of Santa Barbara, all of it was stunning, and I don't regret taking my time walking around these environments. Exploring the beauty surrounding me was part of the best times of the game. And for everyone complaining that AAA games don't launch without a ton of bugs, take a look at this game because I don't think I saw one bug. There wasn't a single one. Not one.
Political controversy.
I'm going to say some things that have likely already been stated before by other people or even myself, so please bear with me. First things first, I really do not think this game is as bad as everyone has decided it is. I also do not think this game is as great as everyone says it is either. I think it's blandly mediocre, excluding graphics and like the game's performance on the PlayStation. Acting was decent, but without good writing and storytelling, it almost doesn't matter. About the politics. I lived in LA for about 10 years until I left a few months ago, and there's something you need to understand about radically left-wing people. They don't think they're radical. They do not think what they believe is political. They believe these things with their hearts, not their brains. They are inherently hypocritical and are disconnected from reality in such an extreme way that it alienates everybody around them. They truly believe that being LGBTQ is this super common thing and that they are marginalized and are an oppressed group. The same applies to women, racial minorities, and the idea that the straight white man is just pure evil. This comes from the left's warped sense of morality, and they deem anyone who thinks this is political or disagrees with them to be an enemy. This way, they can conclude themselves victorious and have won the moral high ground in their own minds, of course, because as I said, it's all a delusion. And nobody wants to hate anybody, so if you dislike something and the person happens to be part of these oppressed victim groups, this is all intersectionality, and you are a higher group or class, then you are a bigot. It's very simple. It's manipulated morality. Every single leader, tough enemy, lead main character was a woman or minority. Every important story beat was made by a woman, which is honestly probably why it sucked. The leader of Jackson, Wyoming's community was a woman. The leader of the cult was a woman. The leader of the Wolves, which was Abby's group, was a black man. The lead characters were both women. Ellie is a lesbian. Abby was androgynous. Abby's companion in the game was transgender. All the tough enemies you fight, like these little mini bosses with huge melee weapons, they're all these giant masculine-esque women, except for I think the last one, where you like rip this man's jaw off. He's a white man. You just totally destroy them. And as I just said, all the straight white men in this game were brutally murdered, spit on, and beaten to shit. Not one character ever listened to any straight white man. Part of the ending of the game has you being part of a lesbian couple raising a child because apparently you don't need fathers after the apocalypse. All the character dialogue between Ellie and Dina has them talking about their relationship, snuggling, there's a sex scene, they're calling each other babe constantly. The gameplay segment of Abby and Lev has them talking about Lev being transgender and how she is brave and punk rock for defying her community's rules. The opening act has a straight white male apologizing to Ellie for being a bigot and makes her a sandwich. She denies his apology and gives the sandwich to the Asian dude who nobody cares about and calls it a bigot sandwich. Now, I just want to say, whatever. Naughty Dog can do whatever the fuck they want, but why? What is the point of any of this? I just don't understand what the emphasis on hating a specific group of people and force-feeding social justice warriors what they want. What good does that do? It does nobody any good. That's what it does. Before the game came out, I was trying to be optimistic. I kept telling my friends, you know, they've reconstructed society from this crazy infection. Maybe traditional relationships are just out the window and they don't care about that kind of stuff. But when you tack on all the extra stuff, it's so obvious this game is a piece of political propaganda with a weak story and uninventive gameplay. I don't blame Naughty Dog or Neil Druckmann for creating this in the manner they did. They live in that bubble that does not know any other way of viewing the world right now. And it's been escalating for years, and they just don't know any better. They really don't. I actually pity them, and I hope that they can learn their fans, and particularly straight white men, are not out to attack or hurt anybody. We don't hate women. We don't hate LGBTQ members. We just want to live and be treated just as anybody else. And most of us will treat others with respect as long as it's reciprocated, no matter who you are. But this game is not that. It is not fan service. It is not fun. It is not decent. It destroys everything the fans cared about for the sake of being part of the political machine. It's just another cog. Do not be fooled. I also understand the problematic nature of Naughty Dog's copyright striking everyone through misuse and abuse of said system. And I'm not a legal expert, so I don't think I can proficiently discuss the nature of this issue. But from what I do know about copyright law, and there's a great video I can link in the description. If I forget, please leave a comment. I will put the link in the description. It's a very good video. If something is on someone's channel that was not transformative, then it was breaking the law, and Naughty Dog has every right to take it down. Where I think things become gray is the fact that the game was not released yet and people who were posting things about the game, transformed or not, were getting strikes. I don't know if that's legal or not, but the game was not yet a product that people could obtain, so it's just weird, murky waters, and I wonder if even talking about something, even if it's transformative, if it's not in existence and able to be marketed, I wonder if that counts. I don't think it should, but I don't create laws. I just know it's likely murky waters, and Naughty Dog made the wrong choice when it came to fighting critics. They should have stayed within the law and let people speak their minds, and it would have drawn less attention to the leaks, and it would have made this game less controversial, unless that's what they were going for.
Conclusion.
All said and done, The Last of Us 2's biggest crime was that it was intensely boring. So boring, in fact, that I made the difficulty very hard, but then I made items common so that I could vary up my gameplay methods and see some of these quote-unquote upgrades that I apparently needed to try out. The tricky thing about video games is that there are so many, but unlike movies, television, or music, usually the best ones are at the AAA level. So The Last of Us 2 butchers the little trust we had with these corporations and has pushed me 30 hours closer to death. My whole life as a gamer, I've never cared as much about a story as I did the gameplay. The story was always a bonus for me, and this game didn't get many things right other than graphics, and graphical fidelity can carry a game only so far. If Naughty Dog cut about 15 hours off the game and altered certain characters and story arcs accordingly, I think we could be seeing at least an 8 out of 10. But what's done is done. I can't say that I had the highest hopes for The Last of Us 2, but what hopes I did have, I thought would be higher than this.